Hi, everybody, and welcome to this very special episode of the Dr. Keith Darrow Podcast, where today we have a very special guest with us, Suzanne Picerno. Suzanne, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Keith.
You know, Suzanne, I'm excited to share your story, which it sounds like from what I've got to know about you has really been a struggle. Maybe a struggle is a better word than story, but sort of growing up, having hearing loss, eventually becoming completely deaf, completely profoundly hard of hearing, going from hearing aids to cochlear implants. I have spent over 20 years working with hearing impaired individuals, and I would never for a second be able to put myself in those shoes. I don't know what it's like. I don't understand the struggles, even though I work with it every day. And so I appreciate your passion behind this. You went from the corporate world. Now you've written a book, a children's book all about treating hearing loss. So again, welcome and thank you for sharing your story.
Well, thank you very much. It's definitely been a journey. It has not been easy. You are exactly correct. I spent 30 years crying every single day over my hearing. And I finally embraced it and realized that I had to do something with it to make a difference.
Now, can I ask, and I hope it's okay, I think that sharing this personal story is really powerful. What were behind those tears?
I think when you have a hearing loss to the degree that I did, and mine was genetic, there was nothing I could do about it. I learned when I was 21 that I would eventually go deaf. And about every 5 years, it just, for about no reason. I worked in big pharma. I worked in molecular diagnostics. I was literally making $150,000 a year. And in my profession, you had to hear. And the companies, they accommodated me. But still, there is what I call accommodation, like a Bluetooth phone. And then there's what I call social accommodation and access accommodation, which I had no idea existed until many years later when I looked back. And I realized that today I realize that what we do as deaf or hard of hearing people as compensatory behaviors is seen as inappropriate, is seen as aggressive, is seen as incompetence to hearing individuals because we hear only parts of a conversation. So it looks like we're off and running. We don't use the telephone. We're terrified of it. So we leave legal documents in our emails. We document drop the ball on this type of thing, right? So we miss that next promotion. We're always afraid that we don't hear correctly. You know, it's scary. It's lonely. It's really devastating. Communication is the most important thing that connects us as people. And it's, I would say, if you ask me what is the emotion I have felt most in my life, and it's fear.
I really appreciate you sharing that. It is a very strong story. And I've always thought there's not enough advocates in the hearing impaired community. There's one or two celebrities at best who speak about it, but the everyday person who deals with your struggles doesn't have a strong enough voice. And so I'm glad that I get to help project your voice out there and share your experience with everybody, because this show is intended for the hearing healthcare provider, of which I think over 95% of us have normal hearing and don't understand the other side of things. When were you first diagnosed with hearing loss?
Actually, when I was 12 years old, there was a nurse that was obsessed with me, and she'd pull me out of class, and it was embarrassing. I felt humiliated. And I got to this point where I would just sit in the booth and I refused to raise my hand. And
Hmm.
then, we went into high school, and that was it. And then, ironically, my minor in college was speech pathology and audiology. So people always say to me, "Oh, Suzanne, you do so well." I would never know because my diction is so good.
Yes.
I know where to place my tongue in my mouth. So I seem so much better than I actually was, when really I was missing so much. And then
Now that's I don't mean to cut you off, but that's such an interesting point, right? There's the prelingual deaf speech, right? Which everybody knows. It has that real nasal quality, and it's very obvious. You're really wearing your disability on your sleeve. In your case, I'm still I'm still having a hard time realizing how profoundly hard of hearing you are, because your speech is so crystal clear and so perfect. And so that's almost, I hate to say it, it's almost a disadvantage, because
it is.
it seems like everything's fine with Suzanne. There's nothing wrong.
And that's why I always look so perfect. Because for me, it was like I was so hiding something that everybody else could have that disadvantage, so to speak, that was so apparent. And because I couldn't, I had to make up for it. It was a weird thing. And by the way, the reason why everybody else has the accent is because when you can't hear those consonants, those softer sounds, your brain literally can't remember what they sound like.
Of course. Maybe it's obvious because I've been doing it for so long, but we learn our language. Most of it is based on mimicking the sounds we hear. Therefore, if you can't hear them, you cannot mimic them, and you cannot make those sounds.
Exactly. And so, like, if we go and we talk about Eddie, okay, how Eddie came to be, it was interesting because I was actually writing a book about how you promote in the corporate world when you are hard of hearing, because I did not realize the ways that you could do that and self-advocate until after the fact, years later when I looked back.
Interesting.
Because like I said, I worked my way out of a job. And that's when in my mind, I took a big step down and became a hearing instrument specialist, which seems ridiculous that was a step down, but I was so focused on the corporate world. And in my mind, I was looking to become a vice president, which all the friends that I worked with now are, And so for me, it was a deficiency. And it was a really horrible thing. And it made me feel, it just made me feel not good enough. It made me feel like people would find out that I had this huge flaw, even though I was very, very open about my hearing impairment. What I didn't realize, things like, okay, I need to have the courage in a room to say, this is Suzanne's chair, because it's in the center of the room and my back is against the wall. And I need to have the courage to say, excuse me, do you mind trading chairs with me? Because this is going to be the chair that I can hear in. And having that documented ahead of time with my superior, and having it documented that the best note taker in the group is going to share their notes with me afterwards and debrief with me. It never occurred to me. So I'd walk out of a meeting thinking one thing had happened when something else had happened.
Wow.
And I'll never forget a certain meeting where I was sitting there and they kept talking about eyeballs. And I finally said, I know this is going to sound stupid, but I don't get the eyeballs. And they said, Suzanne, our balls, registered trademarks, our balls. And and they all laughed. And to me, I just felt about that big.
So how does that push you, right? I mean, look, I feel like there's two options. You can continue to crawl into the hole.
Yep.
Or you can shine. And you have chosen to shine. You have chosen to advocate not just for yourself anymore, which was always a struggle, but to help advocate for the millions of people who are living today and suffering with hearing loss and the millions that will come to be. So how does that get you to a point of, you know what? I'm going to write a book about it. I'm going to write a book about Eddie the elephant and his magical ear. And I want to tell this story. How does that come about?
Well, it was interesting because I was trying to write the other book and it was so personal that I just kept getting stuck. And I was actually visiting my mother and she was out playing bingo. And I was sitting there and all of a sudden I heard in my head, Eddie is an elephant. And I went, okay. And then he's not a big elephant. He's not a little elephant. I said, okay, I better start taking dictation here, right? And I wrote the first draft in like 20 minutes. And then it's gone through, about 7 or 8 iterations. And it turned into a rhyme. And it became something that I realized was a gap in the industry that we have. Because when you go, there's 32 million children in the world that have some form of hearing impairment. And 85% of hearing impairment is what? Exposure to noise. And we're not doing anything about it. Nothing. Because it's not a part of our medical system.
No, it's not. You know? It's not a part of our medical system. The occupational safety and health advisory, like, yes, they may think about noise in occupational settings for work. Even those, I think, are not set appropriately. But when it comes to recreational noise, concerts, amusement parks, headphones, it's the wild, wild west, and people are damaging their ears every day. I mean, I often joke, and I hope I don't mean it to come out offensively, but I often joke, it's my job security. But in reality, I've always said, if I were put out of a job because there was a cure for hearing loss, that would be the greatest day of my life.
Right. And it's interesting in a couple of ways. I don't know if you saw this on LinkedIn, but Starkey, I believe it was, put out this little thing and it showed a baby with headphones on, and it said something to the effect of, it was basically saying, you wouldn't take a baby out on a motorcycle or something like this without a helmet. Why are we doing this to our kids? And it was like, yes. And it's interesting because I'm trying to get little Eddie here into the school systems. And I tell you, it is not an easy job. I
don't want to go off on a tangent about school systems and books. That's in the news enough. But it's certainly what I've learned is it's a very political process, and it's not as simple as you would think because your book is so valuable. Your book deserves to be on every school library bookshelf. It should be in every pediatrician's office. It really should be easily accessible to anybody with a child.
In every ENT and hearing instrument specialist. And I'm not saying it's about making money, because probably I'll never recoup the cost that I put into it, and that's okay, because that's not what it's about. But I tell you what, I was at a conference not too long ago of wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people who were all hearing impaired and such. And they were there to learn how to advocate for themselves, which I get it. But, nobody was thinking about, well, how do we stop this from happening? Right. And that, I think, is huge, because for me, I don't want our future generations to go through the hell that I went through. I don't want them crying for 30 years.
Sure. And the data is clear, right? I mean, just going back, I don't know, maybe to the advent of audiology and hearing healthcare, the average age of a patient was in their probably late 70s. And now with the environment getting louder, rock music, I mean, industry, hearing loss is really, it's fairly accepted that it begins in the 4th to 5th generation of life. And then to think about all the things that can go bad with untreated hearing loss, be it cognitive decline, dementia, falls, losing your home. I mean, it's definitely a different process than you've gone through, having it from such a young age, but it's still so devastating. I mean, it's linked to premature death.
Right.
What's worse than that?
People don't realize it because it's so insidious. I have literally had people tell me, I don't value my hearing because they've never been without it. And I've literally had people say, oh, if I get dementia, I'm not going to remember anyway. And you know what I say to them? I say, imagine this. Imagine you're in your home and somebody breaks into your house. How will you feel? Threatened, violated, terrified. Now you're that same person and you're in a dementia facility. And that happens over and over and over again. Every time a nurse walks in, every time you visit that parent, anytime a doctor comes in, that's dementia. That's Alzheimer's. So yeah, you won't remember, but you'll spend your day terrified.
And given what we know, that 40% of cases of dementia are considered preventable, and the single most modifiable factor for preventing dementia is the early treatment of hearing loss.
Yes.
I would love to learn a little bit more about your journey. How did you go from, and then we'll come back to Eddie, I promise. How did you go from your hearing aids to essentially testing out or growing out of your hearing aids because your hearing loss got so bad? What was that decision like to then say, okay, it's time for bilateral cochlear implants?
So it was really kind of funny. I was so stubborn. I would not give up. I lived in the gray zone for like 5 years. Do you remember Dr. Miyamoto Sr.?
Yes.
I had my first cochlear implant evaluation with him, and he said I was in the gray zone. And I kept going along in that gray zone for 5 years. And honestly, it was not fun. And I continued to do that. I became a hearing instrument specialist. So, of course, I knew every single word. I heard, ooh, hey, toothpaste, right? Hey, oh, baseball, you know. And nobody thought to do the words in Spanish, right? And I would say, do them in different orders. And finally, I had an audiologist say to me, say what you actually hear, not what your brain fills in. And when they did that, my
Wow.
it was like 84, so I was one off, but my word recognition was less than 20% in both ears. So that's what I was working with and dealing with, right? And on top of all this, I had had a very serious concussion years ago. So you think you put that together with the anxiety and all of that. And because I was a hearing instrument specialist and had minored years and years ago, and I just aged myself. But I had minored in speech pathology and audiology. I had done FM. I had done Bluetooth. I had done everything imaginable. You know, had intuitively known where to sit in a room and things like that. I just said bilateral. And Dr. Yates, who's a wonderful surgeon over at Indiana University, he pushed with the insurance and boom, they did it. No appeals, no anything. And the year before I got them. I spent the entire year in isolation. I didn't leave my house except to go to the grocery store or to go to the YMCA and go swimming because I couldn't function. I couldn't even go to the grocery store. They told me the bill. I was like, and I just said, whatever, right? Whatever. I'll just stick my card in here.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's like I said, it's no. So I know you know this, but I want to share with the audience the quote from Helen Keller, who was both deaf and blind. And she said it in numerous occasions. And if you were ever in my office in Worcester, Massachusetts, there's a big sign hanging up with this quote that says, blindness separates us from things. Deafness separates us from others.
Right.
Which is really a powerful, and I feel like the story you're telling is getting at the core of that, right, that isolation you feel, that depression, that anxiety. Because if you ask your normal hearing and normal seeing person, they'll all say, I could live without hearing.
Right.
No, you really can't, because it's what connects you to the world around you. It's what right. connects you to others. Everything we do is based on our oral communication. I mean, there are some societies that use American Sign Language or other sign language, but in general, the vast majority, 99% of us, are using oral communication.
Right. And it's interesting because I've always said I'd rather be blind than deaf, and because it's obvious, your walk with a cane or something. And I think that's the beauty of service animals now with hearing dogs, because it lets people know, hey, I have a disability. There's something I wanted to say. What was it? Oh, I know. I've had people come into my office when I had a large practice, and now I just do Medicare Advantage, and I go to the people that nobody wants to see. I go to them, they're 80, they're 90, they're 75, they've never had hearing aids before. They're the people you don't make money off of, but that's why I do it, because I'm all about service. But I've been where I've had patients come in and their partner goes, oh, don't worry about him. He stopped talking to people a long time ago. He's just a grouch. And I go, no, he's not a grouch. He can't hear, or they sit in another room in their lazy boy chair. And I would sit there and I would say to that person, you need hearing aids. I would cry sometimes in front of them. I say, I am fighting for your hearing because you're not. And you're going to end up in that lazy boy chair, and your grandkids or great grandkids are going to sit there and they're going to say, Grandpa is so mean, because you're going to come across as an angry, mean old lady or angry, mean old man. And you're going to live in a world where you simply want to die, because all you do is watch TV. And guess what? You can't even hear the TV.
Well, and if you can hear it, everybody around you can probably hear it. The neighbors 5 houses down can hear it too.
Yeah, I remember having the TV at 100 volume, and I still couldn't figure out everything.
Yeah. Well, as you know, it's not always about volume, right? It's much more about the clarity. And I think that's part of the issue is for people, especially in early stage 1, stage 2 hearing loss, I can still hear. My patients say it all the time. I'm not deaf. I didn't say you were deaf, but you have a significant hearing loss that is impairing and impeding your ability to communicate with the people around you. And it's selfish, because your hearing loss affects everybody around you.
And one of the things I tell people too, I say, you know what? You need to stop enabling your partner. Don't tell them what the other person said. Make them feel the pain of their hearing loss.
So I want to ask you a couple of things, because I know people that are listening to this, some of them are going to be really interested in this process of, I had a thought, or you said at bingo, I had a thought about a book, and now, right, we actually have the book in hand, published July 2022, on Amazon. How does that happen? I mean, I understand it. I've written 2 books already. I have 3 more in the pipeline, including a children's book, not like yours. Mine is actually very different. It's about educating about audiologists, not about the person with hearing loss. But tell me what your process was like from idea to, all right, here it is on Amazon.
So it's funny because people can just write it up. Oh, it's a kid's book. You know, you got these really, really cute little drawings. I'm going to show you my favorite one. You got these cute little illustrations, which how they came out of my head, noise-induced hearing loss, right? I got to thank Gail Hannon for saying that. So kudos to you, Gail. But I had to thank her for saying, you've got to put noise-induced hearing loss in there. We need to know how Eddie lost and broke his ear. So thank you, Gail. But I thought people have a very strong unconscious block. They don't want to hear about hearing aids. My mother would say to me, don't talk about bad hearing. Don't talk about hearing aids. And I'm like, okay, I better not talk about myself at all, because this is my life, right? So I thought sometimes the easiest way to get through people's resistance is to do something that's simple, something that there's no resistance. And so that's Eddie, okay? He's cute, he's endearing. It's written like a Dr. Seuss book. Everything rhymes. The illustrations are they're just adorable, right? And so he talks about the pain of sounds he used to hear and held so dear, and he missed them and he was sad, right? And he goes searching for his ear and he can't find it. And then when he finds it, there's this little itsy bitsy spider underneath it. And he says, you know, well, the spider sews his ear back on with the thread from its web, right? And Eddie goes, is this going to help me hear? And the spider says, no, right? And we all want easy answers. We all say, okay, I've lost my hearing. We've all say, okay, I've lost my hearing. And I'll just use one of those candle things and
oh God,
put it back, right? And we all want those easy answers. And unfortunately, with hearing loss, there are no easy answers. That ringing in your ears is not going to go away because, you said a chant or something, So there are no easy answers. So what's beautiful about Eddie is the spider helps him. And I think struggling with a hearing loss on your own is impossible. You need help. You cannot go and get your ears tested by yourself and then go home with your little audiogram and try to tell your partner who's been saying you need to do something about your hearing, and you finally get it and you go try to explain this chart. No. Tell your partner hearing aids are $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, and they go, no way, man. We need to go, buy that jacuzzi we've been talking about, right? And no, you need to do something about your hearing.
I think you're so right. And that brings me back to, right, when a patient calls in, we're always telling them it's vital that you bring your family with you. Bring, whoever's it could be a wife, it could be children, anybody that your hearing loss is affecting needs to be part of this for 2 reasons. One, we're about to diagnose you with a major medical condition that impacts everybody around you. And when we talk about your treatment plan and everything that's involved, it's going to involve them too. It's not just one of these where you're on your own. Your hearing loss affects everybody. Therefore, it's important that they're part of the rehabilitative process.
Right. Yeah. 2 thoughts. One, and I'm going to get back to that, but one, the spider is you. The spider is me as a hearing instrument specialist in putting that treatment plan together. And the spider helps Eddie come to find that treatment plan, the hearing aid. And I think what's wonderful is that The hearing aid is magical. It's bright blue. And Eddie can hear again. And it'll never be normal hearing, because that's the other mythology that people think hearing aids, oh, you got them, you're perfect. Right. And that's not the case, but they help. And hearing aids then become cool. Eddie makes that cool, right? And part of the reason people don't want to get hearing aids, I think, is less cost, really. That's an excuse.
It's an excuse.
Oh, I'll be old. You look old. There's something wrong with me, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure you've said this too. I look at my patient and I say, trust me, not hearing makes you look a lot older. And right. Everybody is talking about you behind your back, about how grandpa can't hear anymore and he's getting old and grouchy, just like you said before.
Right. Right. And well, and the imagery that I use too is, think about when we got braces. Here I am dating myself again. But when we got braces, we were in what? Junior high, high school sometimes. Now kids get them in kindergarten, and they've made them cool with colorful rubber bands and all that kind of stuff. And kids, Eddie will make hearing aids cool, because kids will learn, oh, hearing aids are cool, right? And mom and dad come home with that hearing aid and they're like, how do I explain this to my kid? When my kid goes, what's that behind your ear? Read Eddie.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Anybody out there. So if you're having an issue with hearing loss, I don't care what your age is. If it's your grandfather, if it's a child, if it's a niece, nephew, uncle, you definitely want to get a copy of this. It's really easy to get on Amazon, right? Eddie, the Elephant's Magical Ear. It's a fun book, and it takes you on a nice journey. So I do appreciate you finally taking your thoughts, putting that pen to paper, and making this book happen. Because as I said, I know what it's like to produce a book, and it's not a simple task. Even one that has a few words and pictures, it's still a very complex task. So one last question before we wrap up, because a lot of business owners in hearing healthcare will listen to this show also. And I think they'll be very intrigued by your story and your book. But I know some are going to want to know more about you as a practitioner. So you went from working in pharmaceuticals, corporate world. Now you are an HIS. I heard you say you owned your own business. You had a practice, but now it's more concierge. Tell me about your business journey.
So I actually went on disability when I had, the whole plummet into isolation and implants. And I actually tried to get some traditional jobs, and I got fired 6 times before I gave up. 6 times. I was so.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to just laugh. It was just.
No, that's okay. I think it's hysterical now. At the time.
Okay, fair.
Fired with me. Oh well, what can I say, right? But I decided to make my practice a mobile practice, and to make it the practice that nobody wanted, basically, which was working with managed care.
Okay.
Because not having any overhead, for me, it worked. And
sure,
those patients that nobody wanted to see. Because I'm sorry, but it's true. In your franchises at this state in the game with managed care, you don't make any money. And they can't, because they have too much overhead, too many marketing expenses. It's not their fault. Managed care isn't set up to work for them. And so for me, I think part of it because I had felt so lonely, and because unfortunately the industry is not set up to work with severe, profound hearing impaired. The industry, you go out there and different franchises, and I'm not going to name names or anything because they're all there to help people. They truly are. But they're there to treat mild to moderately severe hearing impaired individuals.
Severe to profound really is a different.
It's not profound.
It's a different game.
Yeah. So today our hearing aids are getting so much better. We're almost there, which is fantastic. But people didn't know how. I mean, as my hearing disintegrated more and more and more, I was seen as incompetent even in the industry. And I didn't realize it either as a hearing instrument specialist, because guess what? I got used to how I heard too, right? Just like everyone else. So that's why I do what I do now, is because those individuals have to be seen too. And I like working with the elderly. I like educating. And they're the sweetest people, you know, and they really appreciate hearing. And, you know, I think it became so painful for me to sell hearing aids, to sit there and fight for people's hearing. I just couldn't do it anymore. It hurt too badly. So I just, honestly, I'm credentialed with every single managed care there is out there, from True Hearing to Nations to Echo to every single one of them. And so you go out and I test people and they want hearing aids. And I don't try to upsell them. I get their hearing aids for free. Most of them want them for free. It's not about, you know, making huge amounts of money for me. I just want to give them the gift of sound at whatever level they want, can afford, you know, whether.
Suzanne, there really is nothing better than seeing the hearing smile. I know you know exactly what I'm talking about, when that patient first realizes all that they've been missing and the joy just comes back to them. And sometimes that joy does turn to tears, but it really is, you know, I heard somebody say, a bit of a motivational speaker, probably 8 or 9 years ago, and I've really taken it to heart. Being able to restore somebody's hearing the way you do, Suzanne, is really God's work. It is a miracle. You are a miracle worker. And so I am grateful for everything you do. There's enough people in our industry who have shunned the third-party system and won't deal with it, but we need more people like Suzanne Picerno who are out there fighting for everybody, regardless of income, regardless of financial status, to hear their best. Suzanne, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for giving the world Eddie. I think that this is really important. I hope everybody who's watching will go onto Amazon, grab a copy of it, share it in their offices, reach out to Suzanne. There'll be a link in the description if you want a bulk order for your practices. Suzanne, thank you so much for everything you do.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate it. It's been a joy.
Yes. Take care, Suzanne.